We are now live on HHTV. You may begin.
Good evening, and welcome to the second of our candidate forums for the 2021 election season. We started our forum series last Thursday by hearing from candidates for the two at-large positions of the Seattle City Council. And next Monday evening, we'll be conducting the third and final pre-primary election forum, which will feature the candidates for mayor of Seattle. Tonight, we're bringing you another forum. This one featuring the candidates for King County Executive and for our district representative on the Seattle School Board. We also have a presentation this evening on the one ballot issue on the primary election ballot, August 3rd. My name is Neil McReynolds, who along with Laura Weiss, co-chair of the Election Forums Committee, which organizes and conducts these forums, the 3 this month and then 3 more this fall before the general election in November. This series is designed to help you prepare to vote in the city, county, and special district elections this year. Co-sponsors of this series of election forums are Residents Council of Horizon House and the First Hill Unit of the Seattle King County League of Women Voters. I want to thank the League for joining us this year, and I acknowledge Bernice Castor, the new leader of the Seattle's First Hill Unit and one of our residents. Before turning over the program to our moderator for the evening, let me offer a few words about the position of King County Executive and what the job entails. County Executive is the Chief Executive Officer of the county. Among his responsibilities are supervising all administrative offices and executive departments, preparing and presenting to the County Council a budget for the services the county provides, and comprehensive plans, including capital improvement plans for the present and future development of the county, and serving on a variety of boards and commissions, such as the Sound Transit Board and the Puget Sound Regional Council. King County provides regional services to all residents of the county, including the people who live in cities like Seattle. These include a wide range of functions, from courts, jails, and public health services to parks, public transit, and sewage disposal. It also provides a wide variety of services to the unincorporated areas of King County. To fund all these responsibilities, the King County Executive is responsible for a $12.5 billion budget for the 2 years of the biennium. Clearly a big responsibility. With that as background, let me introduce the co-moderator for this evening program and my co-chair for the Forums Committee, Laura Weiss. Laura?
Thank you, Neil. We have 2 candidates for King County Executive with us tonight. Incumbent Executive Dow Constantine and his challenger, State Senator Joe Nguyen. I want to just mention a couple of things about the timing. We have timers who will tell you when you have 15 seconds left, and also then a sign that says, please finish if you've exhausted your time. We want to ask as many questions as possible, so we're going to be hoping you'll adhere with that. Also, we just wanted to remind you that this is a forum, not a debate, so there'll not be rebuttals as such. Of course, you can include those statements in your closing remarks. So let's begin with your 2-minute long opening statement. As a result of a random coin toss, we'll hear first from Senator Nguyen and then from Executive Constantine. We will reverse this order for the closing statements. You've been asked to answer our introductory question, which is up on the screen now. Please tell us why you're a candidate for King County Executive, what your goals and emphasis as executive would be, and how you plan to accomplish these goals. Senator Nguyen.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you, Neil, for the intro as well, and the fine folks at the Horizon House. My name is Joe Nguyen. I'm the son of refugees born in White Center, and growing up, it was a little bit tough, especially after my father was in a car accident, left him quadriplegic. And this community helped raise me. And now I'm the first Vietnamese state senator in the history of Washington state. And that's why I got involved in politics in the first place, was to serve the community that has given me so much. And in the legislature, we made tremendous strides over the past few years, passing historic bills on issues the community has been fighting for decades to accomplish, like tackling our regressive tax structure, alleviating climate change, making historic investments in underserved communities. And I don't believe it was an accident that it was also the most diverse legislature in the history of Washington state. People impacted by policy were now at the table. And we need to bring that energy to King County as well. And the pandemic has exacerbated problems we were already failing to tackle. And now we have a historic opportunity to create change. And when I saw that South King County and other places were still suffering, they had twice the amount of COVID infections and death rates as other parts, I wanted to make sure that we're bringing that leadership to all areas of King County as well. And we needed leaders who will act with the fierce urgency of now. And as was mentioned before, the King County Executive's Office has the ability to address our most pressing issues, whether it's transit, housing, criminal justice, homelessness, all issues that are deeply impacting our communities. And in King County, we've been treading water for too long. And after 6 years of declaring homelessness an emergency, the problem has gotten worse. And I believe we were living the consequences of leadership that was reactive and not necessarily proactive. So we can't go back to business as usual. Our future is now. And the way we get this done is being rooted in community, focused on the people who are most impacted by policies and listening to our neighbors to ensure that we're addressing their needs as well. And thank you so much for the time to be here.
Thank you, Executive Constantine.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm King County Executive Dow Constantine, and it is good to be back with you. When COVID arrived here in King County, the first place in the country that took swift, decisive action, we led with science and reason and saved thousands of lives. The New York Times said that had the nation followed our lead, more than 300,000 lives would have been saved. As we emerge from the pandemic, I bring that same clarity and resolve to the toughest challenges we face. Bold action on homelessness, like my initiative buying hotels to house thousands of people living chronically homeless. Renewing my Best Starts for Kids initiative. Creating public health-based gun violence prevention. Working with community to appoint a new accountable sheriff. Taking urgent action on climate. Leading the fight for regional light rail and an all-electric metro fleet. I am the candidate in this race with the unequaled record of taking our shared progressive values and making them real. Nobody in the country is achieving what we are, and that's why I am the only candidate endorsed by the MLK Labor Council, by the Teamsters and laborers, by UFCW and SEIU, by our local firefighters and more, and by Governors Inslee, Gregoire, and Locke, and dozens of Democratic legislators, and in fact, dozens of local officials across the county. I've received the sole endorsements of many Democratic districts, including the 34th District Democrats, home district to my opponent and to me, the Washington Conservation Voters, the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, and on the 4th of July, the Seattle Times. They agree I'm the clear choice to lead King County forward, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidates will now respond with 1 minute long answers, 1 minute long answers to questions that are coming from Horizon House residents and members of the League of Women Voters. I'll rotate who goes first with each question, but let's start with Senator Nguyen.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And this is the most pressing issue in King. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it's up on there. You go ahead. Everybody can see it. I was
Okay,
about
perfect.
to read it, but it's okay. Go ahead.
No worries. Perfect. Thank you so much. This is the most pressing issue right now in our county. And after 6 years of declaring a state of emergency on homelessness, it simply has gotten worse. I think we need to have a housing first approach, ensuring that people have a safe place to stay, give them the supportive services that they need in order to stay safe and stay housed. However, I will also say, knowing that we have a short period of time, is that we simply need to also help turn off the spigot as well. It is 3 times cheaper to keep somebody housed than it is to take them out of homelessness. And there are a number of reasons for why people become homeless in the first place. We've started tackling some of the systemic issues as it relates to basic needs and anti-poverty efforts at the state level. We also need to make sure that we're doing more to help build more affordable housing, and that in conjunction with just care and other programs to help divert people off of the streets, give them a safe place to live, is how we're going to solve homelessness.
Hey, Executive Constantine.
Well, thank you. First off, yes, we did declare homelessness an emergency, and we didn't do that to tell ourselves it was an emergency. We did that to tell Congress, the president, and the state legislature it was an emergency and to ask for help. We received precious little help, primarily because of the election of he who shall not be named, but also because the legislature and Congress were slow to respond. Well, we are moving locally with my regional homelessness authority that I worked with the city of Seattle to stand up. We're working locally with my Health Through Housing initiative, $350 million to buy hotels and other buildings for people to move directly out of chronic homelessness and into a place of their own with the services to keep them housed. We are working to prevent homelessness and invest hundreds of millions of dollars in housing for those who have the least. So the work that we're doing here now is, I think, nation leading, and more than that, it is directed at helping those who are least able to help themselves get into housing with the services to get their lives back on track.
Okay, thank you. I better read the questions, I realize, for the recording. So second question is, what will you do as King County executive to ensure that the new regional authority on homelessness is effective in getting suburban cities in Seattle to work together to end homelessness? We'll go back. Let's see, how do we do this? We start with Dow now.
So the Regional Authority on Homelessness was set up to bring together not just Seattle and King County, but also to bring in those with lived experience and the other 38 cities with an equal voice and seat at the table. And in order for those cities to step up and participate materially and fully, we also need to have them work with the new director of the authority, whose name is Mark Dones. We brought in Mark in order that we might have the ability to drive an agenda forward, and dispatched Mark to talk with the mayors and city councils of all of those cities with whom we're working on the Health Through Housing initiative, the hotels initiative, to really bring them closer to the conversation about providing these emergency services on the street, which are the purpose of the Regional Housing Authority or Homelessness Authority. I am thrilled with the progress they're making now, slowed as they were by the COVID crisis. And I think that we have a great opportunity to have our region more aligned and united than ever on tackling what is a regional challenge.
Okay, Senator Nguyen.
Yeah, first off, I think the regional approach is a great one. And what's interesting, there was an article in the Seattle Times this past couple of weeks that says there was a rare victory for regional collaboration as it relates to one of the purchases of the hotels. And it shouldn't be rare that there's collaboration. And that's one of the first things that I would tackle, is being able to make sure that we have good relationships with our local jurisdictions. It does make me nervous that there are 8 cities that have opted out of the program thus far. I know that there are some work to get them back on board as well. But having listened to some of these individuals that are in these jurisdictions, what I keep hearing over and over again is they want to be able to make sure that we have the resources associated with the supportive housing, that we have a priority for coordinated entry programs as they go through these programs as well, that they have potentially day centers and respite cares. So being able to work with our communities and having the ability to listen and also turn that into policy, I think is an important thing to get the regional approach to work with our local jurisdictions.
Okay, thank you. The next question. In 2020, voters approved a charter amendment that provides for the appointment of the King County Sheriff by the county executive with approval of the county council. What quality or skill do you consider to be the most important in your evaluation of candidates for this position? Senator Nguyen.
Thank you so much. And that was one of the reasons why I got involved in the first place. Was there was a young man named Tommy Lay who was shot by law enforcement in Burien, and mobilizing for him and his family through a community is how I got involved in the Office of Law Enforcement Oversight at King County. So this is near and dear to my heart. In the short time that we have, one of the things that I would look for is somebody who sees their role as a guardian and not necessarily a warrior. I think fundamentally the culture has shifted in a way that isn't necessarily protecting our communities as best as they can. And honestly, somebody that will look at this position and rethink what policing could look like in King County as well, because we are the 12th largest county in the entire nation, bigger than 14 states. I believe that the actions that we take here can have ramifications, not just in King County and in the state, but abroad as well. So somebody willing to take a look at how this has or has not been working and being able to actually shift what that might look like in the future, whether it's ensuring that we have more behavioral mental health needs covered in a different jurisdiction, whether we rethink how we do pretextual stops, things like that. Somebody who thinks outside of the box of what this could be.
Thank you, Executive Constantine.
So we've already been driving change in the criminal legal system. For example, the parents of Tommy Lay came to me and said that they wanted changes in the inquest process. That is effectively the coroner's inquest, but a public process in King County. And we gathered bereaved families of many who had died at the hands of law enforcement and crafted a new process, lauded by those families, but challenged by some of the police departments, including the King County Sheriff's Office itself. It's before the Supreme Court right now. We need a sheriff who has the ability to lead change consistent with community values, expressed community values, and lead that change within the context of law enforcement, to have the credibility and the clarity to change the law enforcement profession. And part of changing it is narrowing the scope of challenges that we rely on the police to respond to and broadening those for which we have human service and public health responses, to go to community, to diffuse conflict, to help those who are in behavioral health crisis and avoid having them become the next person coming into conflict with a police officer.
Okay, I'm going to confuse the situation here by skipping the question that I was going to ask another question about the sheriff's office, but I'm going to go on to the question which is number 5, Jenny, for the titles, if you can. The county is responsible for funding mental health services. How will you improve and increase delivery of mental health and addiction services to people experiencing homelessness? Executive Constantine.
So there are a number of challenges, including the federal government's and subsequently the state government sort of backing away from behavioral health funding. The state government has begun to rebuild the capacity for behavioral health, but it has been like propping up a house of cards for us at the local level. We have moved to figure out how to provide treatment on demand. The problem in getting treatment on demand in our county is there are not enough providers, not enough employees. They're not able to keep people, and part of that is about the compensation paid. So we ran a pilot with private sector partners to help bring that up to speed, to provide treatment within a day of the time that we reach out for it. We're deploying on the streets of Pioneer Square right now a 24-hour behavioral health team that is going to be able to go out and engage people who are having crisis on the streets, get them somewhere safe with the treatment they need to be able to be successful. And the work we need to do now is going to have to be in partnership with the state to increase the funding to create not only outpatient, but also some inpatient capacity, because we shouldn't have the jail be the second largest behavioral health facility in the state.
Okay. Senator.
Yeah, what's interesting is that right now, 73% of the general fund goes towards our legal system. And oftentimes, instead of solving for the root causes of behavioral mental health issues, we're simply criminalizing them. And like the executive had just said, the second largest provider of mental health is the jail system right now. We have to rethink in terms of how we make these investments within our communities as well. We know that there are solutions that are there, community and local facilities that are more therapeutic and based in the community's input as well, but also being able to partner with our local jurisdictions in this effort, because they don't necessarily all come from one particular jurisdiction. That's why I think the community-based approach is incredibly important, is to serve them where they are. And the capacity constraints is the biggest thing. I think even if you were trying to get support right now, it would be months before you had access to a bed. So making sure that we reinvest our dollars in this space and not necessarily after it becomes a problem. So be proactive versus reactive.
Okay, thank you. A recent audit of King County contracts awarded to small businesses shows a gross disparity in favor of majority, that is, white businesses. Only a small number of these contracts were won by minority-owned businesses. How should the county administration achieve a more balanced and fair distribution of county contracts to achieve, particularly to minority-owned companies? let's see,
I think
I
it's-
have to remember, where were we? We were with Joe again,
I
right?
think it's me. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, I saw that as well. And what's interesting is one of the first things that I worked on in the legislature was something called I-1000, was to ensure that we had more fair and equitable contracting throughout the state. And I fought hard to make sure that that passed through the legislature. And we knew that we're going to have a tough battle on the ballot, which it ended up getting to as well. And I fought hard to get there. And unfortunately, we came up just short. There's a lot that we can be doing in that space specifically to help ensure that we're actually allowing for access to these contracts, whether it's the state level or local level. Ensuring that we have more resources for the Office of Women and Minority-Owned Businesses is one thing. Having an Office of Economic Development that can help with these as well. But then as we're looking through the contracting, oftentimes there are certain contracts where they have exclusionary language where you have to have a certain amount on hand or have certain contracts previously as well. That type of thing keeps out our communities. We have to be more mindful of what that looks like as well.
Okay, thank you, Executive Constantine.
So some months ago, I announced and signed an executive order, pro-equity contracting executive order that we co-created with affected communities. Our task is not merely to remove barriers, but actually to find ways to get more contracts to Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian-owned businesses to help grow wealth and reduce wealth disparities, to create, affirmatively create racial justice and economic justice. And our aim is to use the over $100 billion in design and construction contracts that are in the public pipeline in our region right now to help grow businesses that have been historically marginalized and excluded. My order includes things like reducing insurance requirements so that they are tailored to the actual risk of the project, or making sure the requirements for experience apply to all the individuals in the firm and not necessarily to the firm. It doesn't need to be a legacy firm. It needs to be capable of doing the job. This kind of work is going to create real economic progress.
Thank you. Next question. How will you improve the effectiveness of the King County Health Department in reaching underserved populations? Dow, please.
Well, first off, I would say that the King County Health Department is highly effective in reaching underserved populations because it has purposely been working to figure out how to be good at reaching underserved populations. Its pattern has been, its work has been to figure out how to partner with community-based organizations, with organizations that are trusted in community. And I will cite, for example, the work on vaccines. There is a disparity, racial disparities in vaccine coverage in King County. The disparities are smaller than they are in other parts of the country because we have purposefully gone out, gotten the vaccines into the most diverse neighborhood, but more than that, partnered with over 50 organizations, it is 50, isn't it, Michelle, that are working to reach hard to reach populations. People are not connected to traditional and often white-led public and private organizations, and to get them the healthcare they need. That is the pattern we must follow in the future. We have to be purposeful, whether it's in public health or in public transit or in public safety even, to be mindful of what is going on in community and make sure that we are working with communities to deliver the best service.
Thank you. Senator Nguyen.
Perfect, thank you. And I think the disparities that we see in healthcare in general are part of systemic inequities that have been persistent in our communities over the past decades, if not generations, that we need to fight with an urgency to actually fix. And I worked with a lot of community organizations previously, especially during this pandemic, who were having a hard time accessing the structures that were in play. And obviously there was a lot of outreach that was done, but historically you have to have these relationships built before the crisis happens, and being able to have those community networks in place as well. I do think that the public health officials are doing heroic work getting out there and being able to get folks vaccinated. I do think that we need to be more mindful in terms of when things aren't necessarily in a pandemic, reaching out to local community members to help them reach those areas as well. We also have disparity maps for a variety of things, whether it's environmental injustice or other types of injustice, and using that to help target our resources. I think being able to partner with our community members, but also targeting our resources in particular areas as well.
Thank you. What would you do to make King County's tax structure less reliant on sales and property tax? by introducing some form of progressive revenue, for example, a tax on wealth or income. I guess now we go back to you, Senator Nguyen. I believe you've just spoken.
I think it might be Dow, but I'm happy to go because I love talking about taxes.
Well, it was, yeah, I'm supposed to be going
Is
back.
it me? Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah, so one of the things that we passed over the legislature this past year was capital gains. That's been something that people have been fighting for decades to accomplish. And the hard part is in the legislature, there's two things that are difficult: raising taxes and cutting services. But it's a necessary thing that we have to actually address. And right now, I serve on the tax structure work group in order to reassess how this can be done. I'm a co-sponsor of the wealth tax at the Washington state level. And what's interesting is if you just had 1% over $1 billion, right? So there's still a billionaire, just that 1% over $1 billion, that would raise $2.5 billion per year. So $5 billion per biennium. Feasibly, we can work with the state to have a piece of that as well, because most of that comes from King County, but there's a whole host of things that we could potentially do in order to make our tax structure more progressive.
Thank you. Executive Constantine.
Well, thank you. I have been, throughout my time in office, a consistent and ardent advocate for state tax reform. We need a system that is fair, that is stable, that is adequate to the needs of the people, and good for the creation and retention of family wage jobs. And when I was in the state Senate, Senator Brown, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and I, as vice chair, created the Tax Study Commission that ultimately was headed by Bill Gates Sr. that led to the income tax initiative on the ballot, which was defeated. But I have no less enthusiasm now than I did then for a tax system that has you pay based on what you have, on wealth and on income. That is what our system should be. Capital gains advance this year, which we've all been working on for a very long time, was a great step forward, a crack in that difficult to crack tax structure. But it's just one step, and we really need to move further and faster for the state to reach its potential.
Thank you. Next, if elected, would you continue to support the King County Strategic Climate Action Plan as adopted by the council? What are your two top priorities with this plan, Dow?
So this is the most important issue facing us. There are many very important issues facing us, but the climate and the planet being livable is obviously at the top of the list. The work that we have done in the transportation sector and in decarbonizing the grid has been, I think, really forward-looking. My work to create Sound Transit 3, I led that from just an idea to getting it passed on the ballot over the course of about 8 years, but also on moving to electrify the entire Metro bus fleet. And we need as well in the legislature to move to end the sale of gas-powered vehicles and to move to all electric. But what we really have to do is decarbonize the grid, which means political pressure and financial help to move out of the last coal-fired plants. And then we are on to transforming the built environment, which I hope we can discuss later.
Thank you, Senator Nguyen.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great plan. In fact, I think we can be even more aggressive. What I did appreciate about the plan was the fact that it focused on frontline communities and communities that are also most impacted by it as well. So not just talking about climate as a whole, but the environmental injustice that happens and being able to tackle those. I will comment that one of my first bills was to raise the car emission standards in Washington state. So we will be phasing out commercial for smaller vehicles by 2030 because we're benchmarked with California. Also was raising the emissions for the building standards as well, because nearly a majority of the emissions in Washington state is between the buildings and also the cars. So getting those two more efficient is going to be one of the key things that we're going to be doing. And also the land use planning. So for us to be able to have more efficient buildings and more affordable housing, we should be making sure that as our buildings are being built, they themselves are becoming more efficient, less reliant on gas, less reliant on, say, for instance, even concrete, using what's called cross-laminate timber. So I appreciate the frontline resources, but also I think we can be more aggressive.
Thank you. Back to you again. What is your plan to reduce youth incarceration? Will your plan also reduce the disproportional number of Black males currently incarcerated?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I think it's me. Just
Yes, you have to get you.
yeah, perfect. Great question. Thank you so much. I think what we really need is community, local-based types of solutions that are very therapeutic, that gives our youth an opportunity to be successful. There are a number of opportunities out there. Multidimensional treatment foster care system is an innovative one that has shown tremendous amount of success. We have a new program within King County as well that does special assessments for each individuals and gives the treatment based off of their particular needs. Right now, there's anywhere between 9 to 15 individuals currently in our facilities right now. We don't necessarily need to have that large a facility in place. We can certainly have community-based facilities to actually house some of these individuals, give them the supportive resources they actually need to be successful, and then completely help them off of the system as well. If we only have a hammer, everybody's going to look like a nail, and making sure that we change the way that we look at helping our youth is going to be one of the key points of this as well. It's like a lightning round, solve systemic issues in 1 minute. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, sorry. Okay.
No, you're good.
Thank you. So Executive Constantine.
So I'm really proud that our Zero Youth Detention Initiative and the work that we have been doing to align all of the players, public and private, has led to a reduction from some 90 youth detained when I first took office to 15 during the first quarter this year to just 9 several times in recent weeks. That is enormous progress that really is the result of just, why does my video keep turning off? Of just plain hard work.
Oh, here, good.
And it's turned off twice by itself. I don't know what's going on. They're just plain hard work. And the fact is that by investing in prevention, like Best Starts for Kids, in alternatives like restorative community pathways, which I believe the senator was just describing, the program that I set up, and by really co-creating solutions with community about how communities and kids are going to be safe, we will be able to reach our goal. Recording's in progress. There we go. Of closing centralized youth detention, which I agreed with Black Lives Matter Seattle King County we should do by 2025.
Hey, thank you. I think we have time for one more. How will you develop a deep level of engagement with King County towns and cities?
So we are deeply engaged with King County towns and cities. I think you may have seen a couple of weeks ago the front page story on the hotel we bought in Renton, with the mayor of Renton and I standing out front celebrating that we had a new place to safely house those who've been chronically homeless. That is hard work because during COVID, we ended up getting into some rough spots with some of these cities because we had to move very quickly to head off the pandemic, and we did, and we saved lives. And that is what I meant at the start by saying that I moved clearly and quickly. We have to sometimes make hard decisions that we know are going to not be popular, but that is part of the job of being executive. The other part is working continually with our partners, including those cities, to get everyone aligned around our shared regional priorities. And we've been very successful at that. I'll give you one example, which is the renewal just now of our Regional Animal Services of King County Humane Care contract. 24 cities joining with the county to provide just about the highest level of care of any jurisdiction in the country.
Thank you, Senator Nguyen.
Perfect, thank you. And I think a lot of it is building relationships, and not just with people that you agree with, but also people that you disagree with as well. In the legislature, what I've really prioritized is trying to talk to individuals, even if I don't agree with them, because oftentimes that's where you find some of those nuggets where you can have mutual work done together. I've already started talking to a lot of these jurisdictions who've done things that I don't necessarily agree with, as well as it relates to, say, for instance, homelessness, to truly understand what issues that they are facing. So it's one thing to make top-down decisions and then have these be disseminated out. I think having people be engaged early on, being humble and listening, and being able to then take that feedback to incorporate in their plan, and doing it in a way that I think builds long-term trust is one of the key things that we need right now as well. Thank
you. It's time for closing statements. You have 1 minute each for a closing statement. Executive Constantine will go first.
Well, thank you. And thank you once again to everyone at Horizon House. I've visited a number of times over the years, and I'm always grateful for the remarkable level of political and social engagement that goes on among the residents at Horizon House. We're coming out of this extraordinary period of crisis, COVID crisis, economic crisis that accompanied it. Then the murder of George Floyd and the outpouring suddenly, for some reason, at that moment in America, after centuries of killing of Black and brown people by the state and otherwise, an outpouring on the streets of our country. And then the President of the United States himself attempting to subvert our democracy, and the tremendous challenge of climate change, which we've been seeing in this heat wave and more. But out of crisis comes opportunity, and that is why I'm running. This moment of opportunity, this is the chance to take all I've done and all I've learned and create real solutions to the greatest problems facing us. And I would very much appreciate your support in doing so. Thank you again.
Thank you, Senator Nguyen.
Perfect. And honestly, it comes down to your values. I believe that great leaders do more than just good things. They empower others to be successful as well. And I don't think we need leaders who think they alone can fix our problems. That's the style that ended up where we are right now after 6 years of an emergency on homelessness with little to show for it. And this pandemic has truly exacerbated the worsening inequities in our society, where infection and death rates for COVID-19 amongst communities in South King County are more than double those of wealthier parts of the county. We can't afford to keep the same leadership and expect real progress. Homelessness isn't waiting. Climate change isn't waiting. Racial inequities aren't changing. And we've been able to get so much stuff done at the legislature because people with lived experiences of failed policies are now at the table to shape them. And that's why I'm running for King County Executive. And I appreciate the incumbent's 12 years of office, but it's simply time for change. We can't change the status quo without a change in leadership. And we have the solutions to our problems. We just need the political will to get them done. So thank you so much for the time.
Thank you both very much for your participation and your willingness to run for this very challenging position. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the program, but you're also free to go if you would like to. So thank you very much.
I hope my friends who are running for the school board will excuse me if I go make dinner for my 7-year-old. Okay.
The dinner
Thank
is
you.
important. Thank
Please do. She needs it.
Priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to King County Proposition 1, which extends and expands Best Starts for Kids. That's the only ballot measure that you will face on your August 3rd ballot. Sam Sperry, who's a Horizon House resident and member of the Election Forums Committee, has written a short article for us explaining Proposition 1. Sally Wren, another member of the committee, is going to read that for us. And I might note that Horizon House members will find this, a printed copy of this statement also in their mailboxes. Sally?
Thank you, Laura. King County Proposition 1, Best Starts for Kids, Pro and Con. Proposition 1 on the August 3rd primary ballot asks whether voters want to renew the King County Best Starts for Kids program. Prop 1 calls for an increase from 14 cents to 19 cents per 1,000 of a property assessed value for 6 years. It would raise estimated $872 million and would cost about $114 per year on a home assessed at $600,000. Pro. Best Starts for Kids is a King County voter-approved initiative in 2015 to support every baby born or child raised in King County to reach adulthood happy, healthy, safe, and thriving through competitive supports, comprehensive supports from prenatal development to young adulthood. Best Starts for Kids catalyzes strong starts in early childhood and sustains those gains as kids progress to adulthood, launching King County kids on a path of long life, health, and well-being. To date, Best Starts for Kids has served more than 500,000 children, youth, young adults, and families in partnership with more than 500 community-based organizations. Among the services and products delivered are prenatal health care, food, car seats, clothing, job training, counseling, education, and youth and family homeless prevention. To date, Best Starts has reached 490,000 of King County's youngest children and their families, and over 40,000 of King County's youngest youth and young adults. Vote yes to continue this program. The problem is no one knows whether Best Starts really works. Supporters 6 years ago promised transparency, but they still have no statistics to show whether the expenditures delivered real results. The monies are doled out to organizations to provide services, but supporters don't tell how much is spent on administration and staffing, or what the money actually delivers tangible benefits to children. You'd think the food programs would be simple to account for. Best Starts does not offer such accountability. The Seattle Times editorial board noted this problem, saying, quote, Best Starts hasn't done a good job on transparency and documenting progress as it promised in 2015, unquote. If one goes to the Best Start websites, as the Times editorial board did, one will find what they saw, unquote. Quote, a poorly implemented website and dozens of metrics, statistics that seem more about throwing everything at the wall and seeing where there's success, unquote. In other words, Best Starts can't show taxpayers why the program can continue. Vote no to discontinue this program and vote yes to continue this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally. I hope our school board candidates are here. I see Dan and Michelle are ready. And we're welcoming you now to the second part of our program. First, Anil, it has some words about the role of the school board directors. Neil?
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Our second group featured this evening will be those candidates running for position 5 on the Seattle School Board. Position 5 represents our district on the school board. In the August primary election, only those living in the district, including those of us at Horizon House, will be voting on the position 5 candidates. And then in the finals, the top 2 candidates from our district will be running citywide for one position on the school board. The question, what is the role of the school board and what are the responsibilities of the board and its individual members? Well, the role of the school board is to ensure that the school district is responsive to the values, beliefs, and priorities of the community. Their responsibilities include the hiring and evaluating the superintendent, establishing policies for governing the school district, adopting a balanced budget each year, having legal and fiduciary authority for the school district, adopting instructional materials, and serving as community representatives to the district. Well, being a school board member is challenging in any school district, but if you have 54,000 students, an annual budget over $1 billion, as Seattle has, it's really a big job for those we elect to this office. With that as background, let me return the program back to our moderator, Laura Weiss. Laura?
Thank you, Neil. Hey, Dan and Michelle, we're about ready now for your opening statements. You have 2 minutes to answer our introductory questions. Please tell us why you are a candidate for Seattle School Board, what your goals and emphasis as school director, sorry, it's still saying executive, but as school director would be, and how you plan to accomplish these goals. Per coin toss, Dan Lerner will go first in the opening statement, and this order will be reversed in the closing statement. Dan. I'm sorry, Dan Harder.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks everyone for having me here. I'm Dan Harder. I'm running for school director, District 5. I chose to run for school board because I saw some things happening in the community that were very concerning. I saw what was happening. I live really close to the CHOP zone here, and I saw some of the violence going on there, and it made me wonder where some of this ideology was coming from. And I also noticed that there were some young folks that were involved in that behavior, and I started looking into it a little bit, and I found that there is some of the ideology that these young folks believe is actually coming a little bit from the schools, and so that's what motivated me to initially start looking into it. And what I found is actually pretty negative. The way they're doing it encourages stereotyping, which is terrible. It labels the nation as not just systemically racist, intentionally racist, which is a horrible notion. And ultimately, it ends up being a form of political indoctrination, which I think is terrible. And it's actually the opposite of what the public schools are supposed to do. And of course, they're doing this. They adopted over the last couple of years both an equity policy 0030, and they also have the anti-racist policy, which is, I believe, is still going in negotiations. And if you look in detail at those policies, they actually talk about whiteness, and they define whiteness as this negative thing that you got to be worried about. And they go into detail about how we need to, but the way that's implemented, it's implemented through these policies by stereotyping based on group statistics. And what they will do is go and say, okay, these are the groups that you belong to, and based on your group identity, you therefore have these resources allocated based on this group identity. And I think that is terrible. I think it's toxic. So that's the first thing I would want to address when I become director. Many other issues, of course, to deal with, but that's what's motivating me.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Michelle Sarju. Michelle, please.
Thank you. It's good to be amongst some of you who are friends. My name is Michelle Sarju, and for people who may have visual access needs, I'm African American. I have curly hair. I'm wearing glasses with a purple tint and some kind of colored shirt. I don't know what it is. It's all different colors. I'm a 34-year Central District resident. I'm the mom of 3 children, as well as a foster mom to about 5 children. And I'm running because I believe every student should have access to a high quality public school education. Far too often, things like race, where your school is located, or your socioeconomic status actually impact who has access to high quality public school education, which in my opinion is our birthright. I have been very active in this school district with my 3 kids and my foster kids. And I worked with Mary Bass, a former school board member. And so I know what it takes behind the scenes to actually do this job. Some of my priorities include, we need to support the social, emotional, and mental health of our students. The pandemic has been difficult for all of us, and it's been particularly difficult for our kids. And so our schools need a social worker and a family support worker in every school all day, every day. We need to ensure that there's a robust implementation plan to support in-person learning as well as virtual learning for the upcoming 2021-22 school year. And then I would like to see the school district reimagine what it looks like to assess our students in a way that actually demonstrates what they've learned and what they've retained. So I'm excited about what SPS can be for all students. And I hope that you will join the Emerald Youth Organizing Coalition, Seattle Times, Women of Color in Politics, and Women of Color in Education, and support my campaign.
Thank you. Now, going to be responding with 1-minute answers to a series of questions that have been written by Horizon House residents and members of the League of Women Voters. So first question, how do you define your authority, responsibilities, and limitations as a school board member in relationship to the superintendent of schools? Michelle, please start.
Yeah, so I think in the Seattle Times endorsement, I at least in one of the endorsements, I talked about one of the roles of a school board member is nose in and fingers out. And so what that looks like is, for example, the superintendent is responsible for the hiring and termination of the district administration employees. Whereas the school board member, we are responsible, we are the superintendent's boss. And so what is important in that is that there be sort of a clear job description, expectations, and then a way to assess the performance of our school superintendent. Since I've been in this district, we have had 7 superintendents. And I feel like we can no longer accept that as the status quo. We need a different way forward in thinking about who we hire and what we expect from them. And we also need to consider looking locally rather than looking for a shiny object located somewhere else in another state that knows nothing about this district. So that's what I believe my role will be in relationship to the superintendent, as well as district administration.
Thank you. Dan.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Michelle said. I think we do have to look for a superintendent that is going to stay, that he's not using this position as a stepping stone to the rest of their career, someone that stick around, and someone with appropriate leadership experience, executive leadership experience would be fantastic. And I think we just have to keep that in mind, that someone that's going to stay and have a vision that we agree with, and that's going to perform and has a history and a track record of performing in an executive level educational position is what we'd be looking for. So yeah, definitely an employee of the school board, and definitely accountable to the school board. The superintendent works for us.
Okay, thank you. Next question. In the coming year, the board will choose a new superintendent. What qualities and qualifications do you consider essential for that post? We'll start with Dan on this one.
Yeah, again, I think the main qualifications would be experience, a track record, and having a vision for the school district. Someone focus on academic excellence and let that be their driver in every situation, and that can have a vision for how every student can succeed regardless of their background. Someone that's not afraid to set high standards for everyone in the school district. Someone that won't apologize for those high standards, and someone that can strongly implement the policies set by the board, and someone that really is unafraid to do what needs to be done to maintain standards. And also dealing with coming back from the pandemic, from remote learning. That's going to be one of the major issues. So someone that has some experience in crisis management, and I think would be a plus, and mostly someone that has experience dealing with a large organization and being outcomes focused.
Thank you, Michelle.
So that's what I would look for.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Right. I think Jenny can put it back up on the board, but I'll read it again. In the coming year, the board will choose a new superintendent. What qualities and qualifications do you consider essential for that post?
Yeah, I think, we did have a superintendent, John Stanford, who was not historically, had not historically been a superintendent. And he unfortunately met an untimely death, but he was quite a visionary, a strategic leader. And one of his superpower gifts was engagement with the community. I think what we saw with the last superintendent is that she didn't understand what it meant to engage with this very diverse community that we have in our Seattle Public School District. of 54,000 students. And so while someone in this job definitely needs to have the experience of executive leadership and understanding budget, they also need to be a collaborator with the teachers union. They need to understand and recognize the importance of engaging with the families, with the students, right? That's who we're here to serve. We're not here for our own adult elevation. And so I'd like to see somebody who not only has the executive leadership and the financial experience, but someone who's a visionary, knows how to collaborate, and is interested in working with the community of Seattle Public School students.
Thank you. This next question is a follow-up in a way. What specific plans do you have to engage with constituents in your district to better understand the needs of schools and students in the community? Michelle.
Yeah, I'm already doing that. In my opening statement, I talked about the Emerald Youth Organizing Coalition. They were the first group that I officially met with. And they set up a Zoom meeting with me. They grilled me. Like they asked me some really, these are high schoolers. They asked me some really hard questions, which I was very appreciative of. And so we are still in a pandemic. One day we will return to in-person meeting, but for now I've purchased a Zoom account so that I can engage with the people that I will be serving, and that is the families and the students of Seattle Public School District. I can't do my job well without knowing what it is they need as a larger group and a larger community. And so I intend to hold community engagement meetings. I intend to listen to students. I intend to listen to parents and families. I intend to listen to teachers, because teachers matter in this too. We are gifting them, our children, for 6 hours a day. And so I think I answered the question. I forgot entirely what it was, but anyway, I'll stop there.
Thank you. Dan.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of Michelle's intent there. Just meeting with as many people as possible all the time. I admit that I'm a little bit new to the educational system as far as being involved in Seattle. That's okay. Sometimes it takes a new vision or new voice to shake things up a little bit. But yeah, absolutely, I can spend lots of time talking to as many people as I can, parents, teachers, students, and I definitely will have regular and continual availability for anyone that wants to talk at any given time.
Okay.
And go to as many community events as humanly possible. That's my plan.
Thank you. Next question. What are the major problems that students and teachers face with transition back to classroom learning? How can these problems be mitigated? Dan, let's start with you.
Well, I think that the main problem is making up for lost time. I think we've got to get students back up to where they should have been had they been in classes this whole time. So I think the number one problem is catching up academically. Now, hopefully, they've made some progress in the over the last year, but my thought is that they are behind a little bit, and we need to focus even more on academics, put all of our resources towards supporting the academic. And if that means sacrificing some other priorities, so be it. Academics is the number one priority. And so we need accurate assessment of where the kids are, not pulling any blinders over our eyes over where kids actually are. And if kids are behind, we need to be realistic about it and provide all kinds of resources and really emphasize bringing students back up to the appropriate grade level.
Thank you. Michelle.
Yeah, I see this as a two-part question. The question is, what are the challenges for the teachers as well as what are the challenges for the students? And those are, while there may be some similarities like a Venn diagram, they may meet in the middle somewhere. But I think for teachers, the teachers have to be supported, right? They too have been impacted by this pandemic. and having to teach in a way that when they went to teachers college, that's not how they learned how to teach. And so they need to be supported as they transition back to the classroom to meet students who have been equally, if not greater, impacted by this pandemic. Our children are social human beings. They've been isolated. They've lost social skills as well as academic learning. And so our school district needs to welcome them back with open arms. They need to prioritize their social, emotional, and mental health, while at the same time having a strong plan before they walk through those doors about how they're going to make up for the lost learning in such a way that's strengths-based and not punishing of either the teachers or the students and their families. And so I think that's the collaboration that has to happen between now and September.
Thank you. Michelle, we'll stick with you for the next question here. How can you ensure that families furthest from educational justice, the Black and Brown families, are heard and have their needs met, especially when our education system caters to families with the loudest voices, who are often white, middle class, and have access to school board members?
Yeah, well, I have personal experience with this as the mom of 3 Black children who I had to fight for them. And I had the resources, I had the education, I had the sophistication. That's not the case for every single parent who looks like me or every other brown or indigenous or other parent of color. So I know what it looks like to advocate for children who are the most marginalized. And there's often this rhetoric that happens when we talk about this. And both Dow and Joe Nguyen actually spoke to this. And the concept is targeted universalism, which essentially is you prioritize those who have the most need, right? You're not excluding those who are getting what they need. You're not trying to take away from what they have, but you're prioritizing those who are not getting their needs met. And in this case, in this school district, it's Black and Brown children, and that has historically been the case for the 34 years I've lived in this district. And so I plan to work with the school board, other members, 6 other members, remember, the district administration and the superintendent to figure out what is necessary so that all students can be successful and be happy, healthy, safe, and thriving in our school system.
Thank you. Dan.
Yeah, the role of public schools is to reduce and eliminate disparity through quality ed, to provide resources to those individual students that need those resources, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their identity. And so targeted universalism, the problem with that is it does that racial stereotyping. It does say, because you're a member of this identity, it could be gender stereotype, whatever, because you're a member of this identity group, we're going to apply resources to that identity group, instead of saying this individual child needs help and that individual child needs help. That's what I would do. I would focus on those children that need the help and get away from the idea of stereotyping based on identity groups.
Okay, thank you. Next question. The Seattle Public School District currently has an interim superintendent and a track record of high turnover of superintendents. What do you see as your role in creating a strong leadership team to govern the school district? Let's, Dan, continue with you here.
Sure, I'm just, could you repeat the question real quick?
Okay, the Seattle Public School District currently has an interim superintendent and a track record of high turnover of superintendents. What do you see as your role in creating a strong leadership team to govern the school district?
Well, I think the superintendent is the first and foremost key to that puzzle. And looking to him to set up his team and those working underneath him, and look at his experience in leadership. So I think that is the role of to the executives through the superintendents, and of course, collaborating with other school board members and working to find the best candidates across the board. But I think that is our primary input is through the office of superintendent.
Okay, thank you. Michelle.
Can you put the question back up, please?
Yeah, right. So these questions are kind of long. Let's see, Jenny, can you find the question again? Yeah, this Seattle Public School, you can read it up there, I guess. So.
Okay. So yeah, that we do have an interim superintendent. And what's unfortunate about this situation is that he, as it stands, will not be eligible to apply for the job. And so Brent Jones is somebody I know well. He is actually from Seattle, a product of Seattle Public Schools, worked at the district, moved to the county, and is now back at the district. And one of the things I'm hoping he will do is identify for board members what are the most prescient qualities that we need to carry on the work of the district for long-term success in the future. We do, like I said, we've had 7 or 8 superintendents since John Stanford, for whom the administration building is named after. And so we've employed the same strategy over and over again. National search, hundreds of thousands of dollars, the next shiny object, and that hasn't worked. And so the school board needs to take a different approach. And I really do believe we need to look locally first. We need somebody who understands what's happening here and what this district needs. And so my role will be to work with the 6 other school board members, as well as the current school superintendent, to find out what he believes should happen going forward.
Okay, thank you. Next question. PTA giving and other private fundraising is kept within individual schools. This contributes to inequality between schools. What are your thoughts on this, and what action will you take on this problem? Michelle.
I know about this really, really well. My children attended TOPS, where we raised over $300,000 every year at an auction. We got to buy whatever the hell we wanted to buy with that money. That is inequity, because the school down the street from me, Bailey Gatzert, doesn't have the economic income base to raise $300,000. I have had a conversation with the current PTSA president to talk about what can the PTSA do? Like, what can they do? They are having this conversation amongst themselves right now, because this is inequity. So if your children are in a school where the families are mostly middle to upper middle class, you can raise money and buy what you need. If you go to Bailey Gatzert, not so much. We are perpetuating the inequality by actually not addressing this. And so that's one of the things that I want to look at. I want to see how we can, in other words, share the wealth in a way that's equitable, and that benefits all students, not just some students.
Thank you. Dan?
Well, sure. I think it's a little tough to say that local parents can't give PSA could set their own policy and say, okay, well, for every dollar we raise, we'll give, I don't know, 75 cents to the local school and 25 into the general budget for the Seattle area. There's different ways that specifically, PTSA, a private organization, can handle that. They could even say, well, we're only going to raise funds for the entire school district. That's another thing they could do, and then give it to the neediest schools. So maybe that's the suggestion for PTSA. But I don't think there's anything wrong with local community and local organizations raising funds for the school that they want to raise funds for, and I would encourage that 100%.
Thank you. Next question. Are you in favor of requiring COVID-19 vaccinations for all age eligible students before they can attend classes with medical exemptions only? Explain your answer. Dan. Dan?
No, I wouldn't require vaccinations for all kids. Particularly the younger kids, or they're not currently eligible. But the incidence of COVID is, having negative reactions in kids is so low, and the potential impacts, unknown impacts of the vaccination long term, we just don't know. So I would say that the risk is so low that I wouldn't require students in the Seattle Public Schools to require vaccinations. I think I would encourage teachers to get vaccinations, and if grocery store workers, think teachers are essential and can take that same responsibility. So I would not require students to get vaccinations.
Michelle?
Well, I'm going to play both sides of this coin. And I'm first going to start off by saying we already have a policy that you have to be vaccinated or you have a religious exemption, unless you have a religious or medical exemption. And so there is a policy that exists for vaccinations in general. The other side of this coin is, COVID is new, as well as COVID vaccines. We don't have enough data yet, particularly for children under 12, as well as over 12, to actually make an informed public health decision on whether this absolutely should be mandatory. I disagree with Dan because I'm in public health. I know some young people who've gotten COVID, and a year later, they're struggling. They're struggling to breathe. They're struggling to think. And so COVID, when it's not happening to you, we can say there's low risk. But when it happens to a parent of a child, that risk is not low, and it can be lifelong. And so we can't just take a, sort of laissez-faire approach. We need data. We have a policy. We need to look at that policy and move as the public health experts tell us to move. We have good science that is emerging around this, and I believe it's going to only get better.
Thank you very much. Next question. We're very close to the end. I think we can have 2 more questions before closing statements. What is your position on requiring district-wide ethnic studies? Michelle?
Yeah, I'm 100% on this. There's a lot of rhetoric, and I've gotten feedback from students too. So this is not just my own personal thinking. There's a lot of rhetoric and politicization around ethnic studies, particularly this term critical race theory. Critical race theory is American history. It's nothing more than that. This country has historically only taught white history. They've taught about enslavement as something that wasn't really that bad or a necessary evil. As an African-American, I've been African-American my whole life. Y'all need to know about my history, period. I know about your history. You need to know about mine. I grew up in Topeka, Kansas, Brown v. Education. Linda Brown is my dad's cousin. I was taken to her house on the regular, and I believe at that time my grandmother was planting the seeds for what I'm doing now. Linda Brown died 2 years ago, but my dad every year was at their high school reunion. The work she did in Topeka, Kansas to advance high quality public school education for all children lasts today. It is past time for us to know about the history of all of us.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, in theory, I'm not opposed to having additional studies on any ethnicity. That's great. The problem I have with critical race theory and how some of these anti-racist policies are being implemented is they're actually teaching a false history. They're teaching the idea that the whole country is founded on racism, that the foundational artist, and that racism is everywhere and it defines everything about the country. And that's just toxic. It's divisive. The concept sounds great, but the way it's being implemented really is toxic and divisive. We need to get back to equality, not the definition of equity that's out there. Equality is the purpose. And I think we have to have a positive view of the country. And it's not about not teaching something. It's about not lying to students and not saying that the entire country is intrinsically racist and that the institutions are somehow secretly opposed to them from the day they're born. And that's just not true.
Hey, thank you. One more question. I'm going to end with this one before you have your closing statement. What do you see as the greatest challenge the school board faces as it moves forward? Dan.
Sorry, I couldn't hear part of that.
Okay, can you see it up on the board now?
I can see now. What do you see as the greatest challenge
the school board faces as it moves forward?
Well, again, I would say coming back from the pandemic, I think that's the greatest challenge because it's an academic challenge and it's a resource challenge. It's an organizational challenge combined with the superintendent situation. That is the greatest challenge. That is the greatest purpose of public schools is academics. So I think somehow getting students back up to where they need to be, I think that's the greatest challenge. I know there's other challenges out there. There's financial challenges. Really is the academics this next year.
Hey, thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, I agree with Dan. I think the challenge though is we need a long-term superintendent to guide this ship so that all students have access to a high quality public school education. That can't happen with every 2 or 3 years, somebody coming in with a new idea, uprooting what's existing, and then leave. And so this fall, our children need to know, their families need to know that they're coming back to a place that is going to welcome them back to the classroom, that's going to support their social, emotional, and mental health. Because if you are struggling mentally, you cannot learn. And so we no longer can ignore the whole person that walks through the doors of our school buildings. We need to treat them as a whole person. They need to be embraced, they need to be loved, and they need to know that they're smart and that they can do this. And so that's what we have before us. And my goal is to hire a superintendent who can carry on the vision of a high quality public school education for every single one of the 54,000 students.
Thank you. Now we'll go on to your closing statement. You have 1 minute for your closing statement. Michelle, you go first this time.
Well, I feel like this whole interview has been a closing statement. First of all, I appreciate that Horizon House hosts an event like this. I have friends at Horizon House, and not just recently from my Plymouth, attending Plymouth, but the Renenbaums. I don't know if you remember the Renenbaums, but our children went to school, their grandchildren went to school with my kids. And it warms my heart to see that you all care about the children of our city. We need everybody to care about the children of our city. We say that they're our future, but we don't actually always behave as if they're our future. And so I'm thankful that you all have chosen to allow us to come and talk about why we're running for school board. I've already said what I needed to say, You know who's endorsed me. I'll drop some stuff into the chat. But I am just grateful and thankful that you all put this on year after year. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Dan.
Yeah, I just want to echo that in a lot of ways. Appreciate Horizon House having us on. Appreciate the great round of questions. It's fantastic. And I just want to go over a couple of things that didn't have a chance to mention. I do want to emphasize safety because I know there's some issues with homeless folks camping out in different areas. So I want to get a policy done for that will handle that and make sure students are safe in a lot of different ways. That I want to make them safe from data collection, I think is another concern of mine. And again, I just want to emphasize that we really should be talking about equality. That's the real route to equity. If you want equity, you got to emphasize equality because, it's got to be the only thing that's fair is when people are treated equally. So that's the thank, really appreciate it. And it's been a good experience. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It was very good to have you here and thank you for coming. We're going to conclude with, Neil has a few remarks before we end, but I'm glad to hear you've enjoyed the evening. Neil?
Yeah, thank you very much, Laura. And thanks for moderating this evening's election forum program with our King County executives and Seattle school board candidates. Well done. It's a good job of keeping the candidates on track with the nice style you have. So, well, thanks to the candidates for participating in our forum, recognizing your busy schedules as a candidate with 3 weeks to go in the campaign. So that's most appreciative that you fit us into your schedule. Thanks also to those who made this forum possible, especially Doris Ray and her subcommittee to develop the questions for the candidates this evening with input from residents and league members. And Rita Ransom and the people like Jenny Simpson who supported this event on the technical side. They will be providing this support for the forums throughout our election season. Well, this concludes this evening's program. Don't forget next Monday's forum featuring the leading candidates for the mayor of Seattle. With that, good night.
Good night.
Thank you.